Saudi Arabia will announce details sometime today. We do understand that this briefing is going to be conducted by the Allied military commander, General Norman Schwarzkopf, and you can see that the television monitor there is fired up, so I think we can expect to see some videotape, either of the results working with the oil spill or perhaps from some of today's bombing raids in Iraq. The President had said yesterday that the United States would be sending a team of experts from the U.S. to Saudi Arabia to help out in the containment of this massive oil spill. Pentagon officials had said yesterday that they did not expect that the oil spill, although it's one of the worst environmental disasters in the history of that region, they said they didn't expect it would have much military effect. But one of the main concerns today is that it will affect the drinking supplies for Saudi Arabia and some of the other Persian Gulf nations, as well as U.S. ground forces. That water, of course, is seawater, but the salt is removed at very sophisticated and elaborate plants in Saudi Arabia. And now with the oil fouling the water supply is in some jeopardy, which is one of the reasons why, in addition to the environmental consequences, the U.S. military commanders are concerned about that. We showed you a briefing earlier today, and we expect to be able to bring you briefings as they happen during the day. It is about 11 minutes after 8 p.m. in Saudi Arabia, and now to the briefing.
Presentation by the Commander-in-Chief of United States Central Command and Commander of Operation Desert Storm, General H. Norman Schwarzkopf. Following the General's remarks, we will have a question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, General Schwarzkopf.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start by giving you a brief operational update before I get into the more formal part of the briefing. Today, as you all know, after 9 days, we've flown over 22,000 sorties and air operations. In those air operations, we have over 26 air-to-air kills by the coalition air forces. The most recent engagement was 11:20 today, local time. 2 U.S. F-15s engaged 4 Iraqi MiG-23s just southeast of Baghdad. At the conclusion of that engagement, 4 Iraqi MiG-23s were destroyed. There were no U.S. losses. The coalition also continues to attack his air force in the air whenever we have an opportunity to do that. And we also attack them in their hardened shelters. As you probably know, our air campaign has started to force his air force into Iran. Just since yesterday, we have over 39 aircraft that have gone into Iran. To be precise, in the last 24 hours, since 1900 hours last night to 1900 hours tonight, we have had 23 aircraft go into Iran. Most of them have been fighter aircraft. We also continue to isolate his forces in the Kuwaiti theater of operation. We are continuing to successfully attack many of the key bridges going into that area. We have had no aircraft losses in the last 48 hours. As far as naval operations are concerned, coalition forces have been actively attacking enemy patrol and mine-laying craft in the North Arabian Gulf and near Bubiyan Island. And as of today, 18 enemy vessels have been sunk or badly damaged. Ground operations continue to be limited to sporadic artillery and rocket launcher fire by the Iraqis, and the U.S. and coalition forces are countering that by employing close air support and artillery counter-battery fire. As far as air defense activities are concerned, I'm sure you know that to date the Iraqis have fired 51 Scud missiles, 26 at Saudi Arabia and 25 at Israel. Most recent attack was last night at about 10:48 local time. I don't think I need to tell anybody here that we took 1 Scud missile in Saudi Arabia from southern Iraq, and 5 Scud missiles were launched against Israel from western Iraq. The Patriot battery in Riyadh, of course, did kill the incoming Scud missile here, and preliminary reports indicate that the Patriot missiles also killed all 5 incoming into Israel yesterday. I think that concludes just a brief operational update. And I would now like to talk to you a little bit about the military aspects of this oil spill. The reason why I chose to brief you today is because I heard a lot of questions yesterday from this group here and also the group in the Pentagon briefing, and we had to leave those questions unanswered because we were contemplating some actions, but we didn't want to endanger the air crews that were involved. Those actions have taken place, and so I'd like to now talk to you about it. First chart, please. I'm going to use a technique that General Powell and Secretary Cheney used, and that's use sketches to illustrate the points we want to make. These sketches all come from hard evidence. They are schematic in nature, but pretty accurate. What you see here is this is the coastline of Kuwait. This is the Almaty, Mina Almaty oil fields over here. And what you have here is a terminal that goes out on a pier, another terminal that goes out on a pier, another terminal. Right down here, these rectangles that you see here are the 5 ships that were located and still are located at those piers. These ships on the 16th of January were low in the water. They were completely full of oil. As of this time, on the 24th of January, these 5 ships right here were apparently emptied of oil, or almost empty, because they were riding very, very high in the water. You also have out here a Sea Island terminal and an oiling buoy. These terminals and buoys are both used to fill the super tankers that can't get into the shallow draft area in this area. As of 12/27 local, what you saw out here was the Sea Island terminal intact and a very, very large oil spill that was coming out of the oiling buoy and essentially looked like this going down the coast. We have gone back and checked all of our military operations between the time when we last looked at this oil buoy and nothing was coming out, which was approximately the 16th, and the 24th at the time we found this situation. And I can tell you that we see absolutely no indication at all, that any U.S. military action caused this to happen. The best estimates we have based upon the length of the oil spill is that this probably was opened up about the 19th in order to have what happened between the 19th and the 24th when we got this evidence. I received this evidence at our headquarters very early in the morning of the 25th of January. We immediately notified the Saudi Arabians of this, and during most of the day of the 25th, we consulted with experts from Saudi Arabia, Aramco experts, petroleum engineers, oil field engineers, and also people from the environmental agency of Saudi Arabia. What we were really interested in is, number one, how much damage this was going to do to Saudi Arabia and the military operations. We were also interested in anything we could do to assist in somehow trying to help with what was going on. At that time, they asked us to try and do 2 things. They said, first of all, about the best thing we could do right away would be to somehow set the source of this oil spill on fire. If we could set it on fire, it would burn off a great deal of the pollutants that otherwise would go into the Gulf and continue to flow down. The other thing they did is ask me to somehow cut off the flow of oil to this buoy. That became a major interest of ours because, of course, we are not in the business of destroying Kuwait while we are liberating Kuwait. And we certainly didn't want to go in and completely destroy the oil field or do undue damage. I would tell you that I am no oil expert. I was not then, and I certainly am not now. And therefore, we needed the advice of many, many experts as to how to go about doing this. And we finally came up with a solution that I'll talk to you about in just a minute. Next slide, please. On the evening of the 25th, after we had gotten the recommendations from these experts, we just happened to have circumstantial happening out here at the Sea Island terminal. The United States Navy encountered a small boat. This was a small boat of the type that is suspected of supporting mine-laying craft, also a small boat that has anti-aircraft on it, and it's the type of small boat that they've been going after out in the area because those boats have been shooting at them. They engaged that boat. That boat happened to be next to the Sea Island terminal, and as a result of that engagement, the Sea Island terminal caught fire. So just by circumstance, we did accomplish the first thing we were asked to do, and that is set the source on fire, even though that's not exactly the way we expected to do it. I would tell you that the almost immediate results we saw, though, on the night of the 25th, again looking at hard evidence, is we found that the flow of oil out to the oil buoy had been cut off, and as a result of this fire, it seemed like that the flow of oil from the Sea Island terminal was considerably less than the flow of oil that was coming out of the oiling buoy. Next, please. This is a blow-up of the crude oil storage terminal north and the crude oil storage terminal south. And basically what we have here is storage tanks, and south of these storage tanks are two small manifold areas, a manifold area here and a manifold area here. These two areas, by the way, are about 3.5 miles apart, and they're approximately 5 miles away from the shoreline. The Sea Island terminal is about 8 miles further out. What the petroleum engineers and the oil field experts advised us to do was to take out these manifolds. They said if we could destroy the manifold here, number one, it was a type of damage that could be repaired very quickly once we went back into the area in approximately 2 weeks' time was their estimate. But they said that if you took out these manifolds, the manifolds essentially controlled the flow of all the oil that comes out of the oil fields into the storage area and further from the storage area out to the ocean, and the same thing with regard to coming through here. So that's what we decided to do. Unfortunately, at that time, the weather was very bad, and this obviously had to be a very precise military operation because, as I say, we don't want to liberate Kuwait by destroying Kuwait. So we had to wait until a time when we could go ahead and launch that against those two manifolds. 22:30 last night was when we launched that exercise. I'd now like to show you a tape of that operation, and what you're going to see here I'll be happy to explain. Go ahead and turn the tape on, please. The type of munition that was used was a GBU-15 guided precision munition fired from an F-111 aircraft. And what you're going to be doing is looking directly through the TV camera in the nose of that aircraft as it goes right into the manifolds, and you'll see the manifold areas. Is someone playing the tape? The tape is not playing up here for this audience. A manifold is a system of pipes that controls the outflow pressure out of the oil fields. That's the best. That's as far as my expertise goes.
You won't see it.
There we go. Is there any way you can back that up? So you're going to get to see a backward attack here, I guess. Okay, that's good. Right there. That's perfect. Now what you're seeing here is that's the manifold area, the very small area that I talked about, and you're looking right through the nose of the guided munition as it's flown straight into the small manifold area to destroy it. That's one. This is the manifold area that was destroyed before. This is the second one. Now this next is a tape that was taken late in the afternoon yesterday, prior to the time we destroyed the manifold, and it gives you some idea of what we had. You can see very, very heavy black smoke, a very large fire out in the area. That is Sea Island Terminal, yes, that's where the fire was occurring and the leakage was happening yesterday. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Now, this is after the attack. This is early today. You will see that you have an entirely different color smoke coming out of here, which I'm told is because the oil is deeper in the water and it's burning much less. And you can see the size of the flame area is much, much smaller than the one you saw just a few minutes ago. We have some still shots up here that I have up for you that I'll show you in a minute that I think are much more dramatic. That'll show you the degree of reduction. Okay, next, please. I know these are hard for you to see, and we'll leave them up for you to see afterwards, but just as an indication, here is your pier area running out here, and you can see the very, very large fireball that was out here. This was as of 0913 on 26 January. You can see how very, very large that fireball is. If you compare that to what you see here, this is a much closer shot of the pier and the fireball here. I think you'll see by comparison that that fireball is considerably diminished. The question may come to mind, why is it still burning? I've been told that because, number one, as I told you, the manifolds were 5 miles away from the shore, and then from the shore you have another 8 mile of pipeline going out to the Sea Island Terminal. You had 13 miles of oil in that manifold, in that pipeline that was probably flowing, and the best estimates that we had originally were that it'll take more than 24 hours before the fire goes out. I would like to tell you right now that I'm certainly not an expert, and I am not guaranteeing anybody that this fire is going to go out. All I'm showing you is what we have done to date to try and use our military power to solve this very, very difficult problem, and I'm trying to show you that we try to do it in such a way that we're not out there destroying the entire economy of Kuwait by doing it. I think that we've been successful, but only time is going to tell. We'll leave that up for you to see later. Next, please. And I guess finally I would just finish up saying that this is what we think the oil spill currently looks like. I think the estimates that you've heard of about 35 miles long and about 10 miles wide is a correct estimate, and it is coming down in this direction, has gotten almost to Ras Mashad, and that's what we see at the present time. I'll be happy to answer your questions now, but before I do, please let me state one more time. I'm prepared to talk about the military aspects of this particular oil spill, and I'd be happy to tell you everything I know, but I got to tell you from a technical standpoint, I do not know a great deal, and I certainly from an ecological standpoint do not know a great deal either. So please bear with me if I say I'll have to defer that question to the experts, because I can talk anything about the military aspect, but certainly not about any of the others. And I'll take the first question. Skip.
General, you've given us a very precise timetable on the war before. You've said we're right on schedule, we're this many days into the campaign, and we're right where we want to be. What are the chances that an oil spill like this, that an ecological disaster, could put pressure on the military to try to accelerate the timetable?
No, I don't think there's going to be any acceleration or any pressure at all. Unfortunately, war is not a clean business. Everybody's known that. If you all are not old enough to remember World War II, I'm really not either, even though I remember part of it. And I can still remember as a very, very small boy the dirty oil balls rolling up as a result of the type of action that was taking place out in the Atlantic. It's not a desirable thing, but it's certainly not something that's going to impede the progress of the operation, and I don't think it's going to bring pressure to bear to do anything different than what we're doing right now. Yeah.
We heard from Saudi Minister of Environment today that this could be 10 to 15 times the size of the spill of the Exxon Valdez. And we've also heard several times from several briefers in the past day that no one expected Saddam would go this far and do something this heinous. Before the war began, there were environmental groups in the United States who were saying, let's not go to war because this could be a disaster for the Persian Gulf if he goes ahead with his threats. Did we miscalculate? Did we not expect that he would go this far?
No, I think that you've answered your own question. Saddam Hussein did, in fact, say he was going to do this sort of thing before. And we did expect him to do exactly this sort of thing. He's announced all along that he would do things to destroy the Kuwaiti oil fields. He's also announced that he would go ahead and pour oil into the Gulf to try and defeat amphibious operations, which incidentally this will not do. As far as the extent of the disaster, I think that, right now it's far too early to tell what's going to happen. I've heard as many different opinions on that as there are people who have given me opinions. Some say that the sea states out here are so high that it's going to mix it up a lot. Some say the type of oil is different. Some people, there's all sorts of speculation out there. So I just think it's something that we have to wait and see. Yeah.
General, if and when a ground war begins, to liberate Kuwait, should we assume that it will be a full-scale operation, or potentially is there room for feints and exploratory attacks in your battle plan?
I'm sorry, but I don't choose to release any of the details of the battle plan. I can't.
General, what interpretation do you put on the Iraqi planes going to Iran? And does the Iraqi Air Force still remain a threat as you interpret it, or is it basically fallen apart?
I think it's tough for me to put any kind of interpretation on what's going on, because there's any number of three different things that could be. The Iraqi Air Force will always remain a threat so long as they have one airplane. But as General Powell stated earlier this week, we have gained and maintained air superiority. We have freedom of action to operate anytime we want to up there. And every time they fly, we shoot them down. So I wouldn't really consider that they're... But the threat is always there, and we're never, ever going to assume away the threat. We're going to be ready for anything that the Iraqi Air Force chooses to throw at us. Yes, sir.
General, on a follow-up, can you talk a little bit about the decision by the Iraqis to fly planes into Iran? Was this a decision made at the high command in an effort to conserve the plane? Do you know anything about it?
I have absolutely no idea.
What about the kinds of planes they've taken in?
Well, they've taken both. But the interesting part about it is that they're now taking their very best fighters over there. I think that's because they've lost an awful lot of their best fighters. Both, and as I say, you know, again, this is speculation, but we have been on a campaign, just as General Powell announced we would be last week, of if they won't fly up to meet us, we will fly down and destroy their hardened shoulders one by one by one. And we have been doing that, and we've been doing it very effectively. You'll get more on that this week. But that may be that they've decided that they can't afford to lose any more aircraft. But again, that's purely speculation. All the way back to back. Yes.
Sir, about 6 days ago, 5 or 6 days ago, a refined products tanker was sunk, and there was reported to be various estimates of how the slick, how big a slick there was from that. Can you tell us what the status of that refined tanker sinking was? Is there any remainder of a spill from that particular incident?
The Navy told me that they monitored that very closely. Because it was refined product, you have an entirely different kind of spill. And they said that, you know, it wasn't much of a spill. There was a lot of burning, of course, but not a great deal of spill. And as far as I know, there is no concern with regard to that.
Could you give me a general area, or us a general area, where that particular incident took place?
That was up in the northern part, up in this area, I believe, right in here, but I'm not absolutely sure on that. We'll get back to you. Richard?
General, are you convinced now that this operation is a success? Is it over? Is more action likely to be necessary? And also, did you encounter any kind of opposition from Iraqis while this thing was going on?
You're talking about when we went in and bombed the manifolds? Is that what you're talking about? Well, it was certainly a success because we accomplished exactly what we wanted to accomplish when we went in there. No, we did not encounter any kind of opposition from the Iraqis, but then again, we very seldom do. One of the reasons why is because we don't let people know what we're going to do ahead of time. Charlene?
General, you said that you weren't surprised about the Iraqis doing what they did with the oil. What, if anything, about the Iraqis have surprised you, and how concerned are you about surprises from the other side at this point?
Well, the only thing that's really surprised me, as I've already stated many times about the Iraqis, is the fact that they haven't, their Air Force particularly hasn't chosen to fight. And also how easy it was to completely take out his air defense system in such a way that we have freedom of action. There are a lot of surprises out there. I and my entire staff spend most of our time trying to think of what those surprises could be so that we're ready for them. And we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to try and anticipate every move that he could possibly make. Right here, yeah.
General, we received calls from people who claim to have seen Iraqi planes engaged by U.S. fighters inside Saudi airspace, perhaps as far south as Jubail, or even further south than that. Can you tell us if there's any truth to that? And also, how far have the Iraqis gotten inside the coalition airspace?
There's absolutely no truth to that whatsoever. And I would also tell you that they'd have to have superb eyesight given the altitude at which these engagements take place and the overhead clouds that's been out there for the last, it hasn't happened. Okay.
General, are you assured that the planes going into Iran will not come back from Iran and be used against the coalition? And if you're not assured of that, are you prepared to attack those planes?
I think the Iranian government has stated that they're neutral in this matter, and the Iranian government has stated that any planes from either country that come into Iran will remain there until the termination of the conflict. I think at this time we should take Iran at its word. They have consistently been supporters of the United Nations resolution, and I see no reason why we should suspect at this time that they will change. I would also say, however, that we would be absolutely not worth our salt as military people if we ignored the fact that those planes could fly back out of Iran after us, and therefore we obviously have contingencies that will take care of that situation if it were to occur. Yeah.
General, you've referred today and on previous occasions to Saddam in personal terms, and you've talked about his Air Force and his forces today. Do you think Saddam is listening to your words now, and are you trying to psychologically intimidate him?
I've been trying to psychologically intimidate him from long before the beginning of this conflict. I think we have pretty well predicted for Saddam Hussein exactly what would happen if he went to war against us, and he didn't choose to believe it, and I think he is, I don't know whether he knows what's going on right now. I sincerely hope he knows exactly what's going on. But I have no intention of psychologically intimidating him as much as I have of spelling out the simple facts of what's happening and what's going to go on happening. Yes, sir.
So you acknowledge that Saddam does what he says he will do. He said he will use chemical weapons, all the weapons at his disposal. Are you therefore expecting him to use chemical weapons?
I think that's entirely too hypothetical. I think that we should, just as we've said all along, he has a vast array of possibilities, and we should watch for those possibilities and be prepared for any of them. I don't exactly agree with you that Saddam has done everything he said he's going to do. Quite frankly, there's an awful lot of things he said very early that he was going to do, that, such as immolate, Tel Aviv. As a matter of fact, he announced himself that Tel Aviv was a crematorium as a result of his own Scud missiles, and I think we all know that, once again, that's another lie, just like many of the other lies have been told. So I wouldn't necessarily agree that Saddam does everything he says he's going to do, but I don't think any of us should discount chemical weapons at all. I think we should be prepared for them. Yes, sir, over here.
You said earlier that you are not going to put more resources, in terms of chasing Scud missiles or launchers, Is that the case? Is still there? And have you knocked down any launcher in the last 5 days, for instance?
I don't know if we said that we weren't going to put any more resources after the Scud missiles. I think I ought to clarify something. I have been quoted as saying he only had 20 missiles and we knocked down 16 and therefore we only had 4 left. I think that's a slight misquote. I think what I said at the time was we knew that he had more than 20 mobile missiles. We had a wide variety of estimates, and I would tell you quite candidly that nobody knows exactly how many mobile missiles he had. I also said at the time we expected that we had damaged 16 of them. We've continued to attack his missiles. We continue to get secondary explosions, large secondary explosions. We have counts that go very high in the eyes of some of the pilots that have been attacking those things, and that's normal in the fog of war, but we are continuing to attack those missiles, and we will continue to attack those missiles, the launchers I'm talking about. And
have you knocked any in the last 3-4 days?
Have we
knocked down any launchers?
I believe we had a report last night of 3 that we attacked and successfully destroyed. But again, it's very difficult to confirm that sort of thing because you're talking about a very small target, a very mobile target, and many times you're attacking them at night as well as daytime. So the only time I'm going to be satisfied is when no more are fired. And when no more are fired, then I think I can very effectively tell you that we've probably taken care of them and we won't be able to take that.
Iraq or north?
I beg your pardon?
In south or west?
I believe the ones last night were in eastern Iraq, but we've had the same thing out in the west also. Back over here.
Point of clarification and a follow-up. Do I understand that by your strike on the manifold today, you've reduced the fire and the nature of the oil burning? Do you know for a fact you've cut the slick, the oil actually getting in the water?
Yeah, no. The way it was explained to me, once again, is if you want to stop the oil, and the threat was the oil that is in fact inside all of those large tanks, storage tanks. In order to stop the oil from flowing out of those large storage tanks, all of that oil must flow through the manifolds. And therefore, if you destroy the manifolds, you interrupt the ability of that oil to flow through those manifolds and out into the sea. That's the way it was explained to me.
Sal, you said earlier there was at least one other installation in the area, the FAO, I think they called it. You said you've expected them to do this kind of thing. Can you do anything to prevent them from doing the same thing to the other installation?
I don't think there's really much you can do to prevent them from doing that. After all, they're on the ground and we're not. That's one of the reasons why we'd like to get back into Kuwait and put those oil fields back in the hands of the Kuwaitis. It's entirely conceivable. Yes, sir.
General, you said that you're not, the coalition forces are not in the business of destroying Kuwait, in the process of liberating it. But in a follow-up to that question, do you feel that you will be able to liberate Kuwait before the Iraqis wreck Kuwait completely?
I think that's an impossible question to answer. You know, he's already gone after the Al Warfa oil fields down in the southern area, tried to destroy them. We passed out pictures of that, and it's entirely likely that he's going to continue to do the same thing. So I don't think there's any way we can ever say that we could liberate Kuwait without any more damage being done to Kuwait.
General, it's being reported in the Sunday papers today, quoting people in high places in Washington, that a decision has been made that strategic bombing is not going to end this war and that a ground war is definitely going to be required. Can you give some sense of your own feelings about that?
I think that the report of the Washington Post says that high intelligence officials have come to that conclusion. High intelligence officials are not the people that are going to make that decision. The President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, General Powell, and I think are going to be involved in that decision. Yeah, let me get some.
An assessment of your air campaign against the Republican Guards, and secondly, an assessment of how you're doing on the bomb damage assessment in light of the bad weather that we've been having?
Yeah, I think that we have, so far I would declare that our campaign against the Republican Guard is highly successful, just based upon the delivery methods and the volume that we've been able to put on them. Being an infantryman, I certainly wouldn't want to be under that type of attack right now. As we said all along, bomb damage assessment or battle damage assessment on a tank division or a mechanized division is an extremely difficult thing to come up with. So I don't think we can give it a better assessment at the present time. As far as the rest of the BDA is concerned, I would say that it varies. You know, we have an awful lot of camera shots coming in from the aircraft that show that the ordnance has been placed right on the target. But as you've also seen from the camera shots, what you see is the explosion, and then the aircraft pulls off, so you don't really see the after effect. And we're trying to be deliberately conservative. We don't want to mislead anybody. We don't want to tell you, oh, we've done something we haven't done. And as a result, we're being deliberately conservative. When we announce something to you that that something's happened, you can take it to the bank.
Do you already know or are quite confident that you have stopped the oil spill, or will it take the 24 hours you mentioned to know that?
No, I think I said before that we're not going to know anything, I think, at least until 24 hours, and hopefully the next time we go out there and take a look, we're going to see a great diminishment. If not, we will go back once again and talk to those engineers and ask them if there's anything further we can do. I would tell you, when you come up here and look at the pictures, Roger, put that picture back up again, will you? I know it's absolutely impossible for you all to see from back there, but when you look at this picture down here, this is now the oil slick that's coming out, and you can see it absolutely is vastly reduced from the very, very thick, murky slick that was coming out. You can see the blue water in between and what is the oil slick that's coming out. That is much, much different than what we were seeing before. So that's a very encouraging thing, and I hope that that's indicative of the fact that we've been successful. Richard?
General, to clear up another point on the oil slicks, the Saudis say that there's a second oil slick and that it's coming from a tank near Khafji, but the oil from that slick is actually north of the tank at Khafji, and there's some confusion about where it's coming from. Is that possibly oil from these tankers that were opened up, or where would that oil be coming from that is creating the slick along the shore that's killing all the cormorants and so forth?
I don't know, Richard. I do know that there was a report of an oil slick a little bit north of Al-Khafji. At one point, we weren't sure where that had come from. We've heard that it might have been, again, an outlet, but I really couldn't give you a good answer on that. I just don't know. Yeah.
We've heard some reports from some of our colleagues that there's been carpet bombing going on in Kuwait, across the Kuwait border by the B-52s. And I know you've been, and your staff has been very deliberately vague about exactly what the B-52s are doing. But it's a fearsome weapon, as you well know. Could you give us a little idea? Are you trying to get mainly to the Republican Guard in southern Iraq, or do you have Kuwaiti targets for B-52s? Which are you carpet bombing, or do you have plans for carpet bombing?
I don't know what the definition of carpet bombing is, and last night I turned to my air component commander and asked him the same question. He said he doesn't know what the definition of carpet bombing is. I don't think that what we're doing would be described as carpet bombing. Carpet bombing tends to portray something that's totally indiscriminate, en masse, without regard to the target. I think we've stated all along that we're being absolutely as careful as we can, not only in the way we are going about executing our air campaign, but in the type of armament we're using. We're using the appropriate weapon against the appropriate targets. We're being very, very careful in our direction of attacks to avoid damage of any kind to civilian installations. It's going to happen. It is absolutely going to happen. There's no question about it. But we're doing everything we can to prevent it, and that's not carpet bombing by any definition.
But you're using B-52s in Kuwait, are you?
I'm not going to comment on where we're using B-52s or what targets we're using them against.
Follow-up, sir.
Yes, sir.
Given the 11 days or so of the air war, could you give us an assessment of what that air campaign has done to the Iraqi army?
To the Iraqi armed forces, it's done exactly what we intended it to do to date, and I wouldn't just limit it to the Army. I'd include the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. I would tell you that later on I hope to give you a much more detailed briefing on this where I can give you a lot more information than I'm prepared to give you right now. Yes, sir.
General, last week you told us that you had neutralized Iraq's nuclear capability and that you were going after the chemical and biological capabilities. How far have you gone?
Just to make absolutely sure that we're correct, what we said, I believe, is we have neutralized their manufacturing capability, their nuclear manufacturing capability. I could never say that there is no such thing as a nuclear weapon, although I think that most analysts have said there is not. But what we in fact said was we had eliminated their manufacturing capability, and I would tell you we're continuing to do exactly the same thing with the chemical and biological capability. We're making sure that it'll be a very, very long time before they'll have the capability to build that type of weapon again. Yes, all the way in the back.
A quick question, a quick technical question. If you blow the manifold up, does that mean that oil then pumps onto the ground in that part of the country?
I already told you I am definitely not an oil field technician.
Second question is there's been film from Iraqi television of a mass being held in the ruins of a church that I think has been shown on CNN. It seems to have been that the church was bombed. Do you know anything about that? Or
I know absolutely nothing about it. I'll just reiterate what I've said. You know, that these things happen. I've been bombed by our own Air Force. I don't think they did it intentionally. I really don't mean to make a joke out of this. I really don't. But you have to understand that bomb racks get hung up and drop. I was bombed by B-52s one time in Vietnam in Mang Yang Pass. They were coming towards us. They did a marvelous job of dropping all their bombs. And then one rack hung up, and it released over my position. And I certainly never went back and said, you know, why did you do that? I'm angry at you. I know you did it deliberately. I will state once again, we are absolutely doing more than we ever have, and I think any nation has in the history of warfare, to use our technology. And I need to point this out, and everybody should clearly understand this. We are probably endangering our pilots more than they would otherwise be endangered by following this course of action. This is something that hasn't been stated. But by requiring that the pilots fly in a certain direction of flight or use a certain type of munition that requires them to go to altitudes that they normally wouldn't be required to go to, those pilots are at much more risk than they would be otherwise. But we have deliberately decided to do this in order to avoid unnecessary civilian casualties, in order to avoid destroying these religious shrines and that sort of thing. And I think we should be pretty, trying to clean up my act, pretty proud of the young men who are out there and willing to do that in order to minimize damage of this nature. Sure.
When the facility containing I believe it was biological weapons was hit, the Iraqis made a big point of saying that this was a facility that was manufacturing baby milk, baby formula. Mm-hmm. And when General Powell came on, he said that in the back of that was facilities for biological warfare. Do you expect more of that kind of thing to be happening, because the charge has been made that a lot of these kinds of things are happening in civilian facilities? I mean, is Saddam Hussein, in your view, placing these things in civilian facilities, and are you inevitably going to end up bombing civilian facilities, going after military targets?
I will tell you quite candidly that there are several almost predominantly civilian facilities right now that I would like very much to attack, because I know for a fact they're being used by the Iraqis, and we're not doing it for that reason. We knew, in fact, that this particular facility that we attacked was, in fact, what it was. We also used very precision munitions on it to make sure that we destroyed that part of it. As General Powell said the other day, it's surrounded by a high military fence. It has guard posts on all four corners, and it was painted with camouflage paint in December. That's not something you normally do with an infant formula plant any more than you put the high berms up around an aspirin plant. I reject the argument that that was only a baby formula plant, but I would also clearly state that when we went after that facility, we went after it in a precision way to damage only that part of that facility that we knew or had a very, very high assurance, as given to us by the intelligence community, that it was in fact a research facility for biological warfare. Yeah.
If I could just go back to the oil spill for a second. Do you not believe the Saudis' estimates that this is going to be an ecological disaster much beyond the scope of Exxon Valdez? You don't believe that?
No, I didn't say I didn't believe that. That's far beyond my level of expertise. As I say, I'm a conservationist, but I'm certainly not an ecological engineer, and I really don't have the level of expertise to comment on that.
Doesn't it play somewhere in the decision to go to war that we could be entering a situation in which we, by going to war with Saddam Hussein, we create a situation like this which could have decades-long impact on the environment? Does that not factor in?
I can see where some people might want to make that argument. I think that that is a ridiculous argument when you consider the cost of human life that the alternative might be also. I think that we could get, that's an argument that will probably be argued long after my time and long after your time, but I certainly don't accept the fact that we should not fight a despot on the basis of the fact that we might for some reason pollute ashore. And I don't take that lightly, because believe me, I'm a lover of the outdoors, I'm a lover of the environment, I'm a conservationist. But I think some great man once said there are some things worth fighting for, and I certainly believe that also. Over here, we had a question.
I just want to follow up on your precision munitions answer. And we know a lot of these pilots have taken terrible risks in completing difficult missions. And this may be a false assumption, but I've got a mental image of a B-52 at very high altitude dropping gravity bombs. I know they have cruise missiles aboard. I'm just pressing you once again to clear up this situation on the use of the B-52s. It's not too surgical at 30,000 feet with gravity bombs, is it?
I'm going to give you exactly the same answer I gave you before. And that's I'm not going to tell you.
I thought I'd try.
Yes, sir.
I just would like to know, how do you characterize the role of the Royal Saudi Air Force in that?
I think the role of the Royal Saudi Air Force speaks for itself. They were the first. Today we had 2 pilots that shot down 2 aircraft. Those pilots are quite proud of themselves tonight, but the first pilot to shoot down 2 aircraft was a Royal Saudi airman. So I think the role of the Saudi Air Force speaks for itself. Yes, sir.
Sir, there are reports that between 50 and 60% or some large figure of Iraqi oil storage and refining capacity have been destroyed. Is this an indication that POL is very high on your list of military priorities?
If it's a military target, it's very high on my list of priorities. Over here.
You just spoke with some feeling about the care with which you're going after, you're pursuing this air war. I think I can imagine the answer, but could you say why you're putting your pilots into that risk? And isn't it as much a tribute to the immense political complexity of this region as it is to our humanity? Or what is the role of the political complexion of this region in that decision?
That's part of it, but that's certainly not an overwhelming part of it. An overwhelming part of it is the fact that we have the capability to do that today. And therefore, if we have the capability, this coalition, the nations that make up this coalition have deliberately determined to use that capability to limit the damage against innocent people, because we've said all along our war is not against the people of Iraq. I would contrast that with what the enemy has done and what the enemy continues to do by indiscriminately using weapons of terror and indiscriminately doing things like that, which make no sense at all. Okay, when it comes to any sort of a reasonable attempt to limit the scope of this conflict and not do damage to innocent people.
As a follow-up to that, sir, is it not a difficult decision for you personally, if not as a commander, to put U.S. servicemen's lives at risk in return for not hitting? You were saying how difficult it is.
It's a difficult decision for all of us, and But I'll tell you what, that's sort of a tribute to the great young men and women that serve under us, that they understand that it's a difficult decision for us, and they're willing to accept those kind of decisions, because I think they have a very high confidence that none of us, from the President of the United States all the way down to the lowest platoon leader, are going to do anything to deliberately risk their lives when we don't have to. Last question, Skip.
General, there's been a discrepancy in the figures that have been released from Iran and the figures that have been released in Washington and here today in the number of planes that have crossed over into Iran. They seem to be consistently lower from Tehran than from Washington or Riyadh. Why do you think that is? Why are the Iranians underestimating the number that have come in?
I couldn't answer that question. I have no idea. I would tell you that you're probably going to see different figures all around, because in fact there are many different ways of picking up what airplanes are going in, what airplanes are going out. The weather is bad, and it's not a precise thing. It's not one of these things where you just count everything. So I think those numbers will continue to float on you. I think the important, significant thing is the fact that it's going on right now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
This has been live C-SPAN coverage of the U.S. military command briefing from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We heard from General Norman Schwarzkopf, the commander of Operation Desert Storm. Please stand by, as we're expecting a Saudi military briefing. In just a few moments, we'll bring it to you live here on C-SPAN.
C-SPAN, the cable satellite public affairs network, and its companion network, C-SPAN 2, are brought to you as a public service of the cable television industry.
The unedited public policy look at the Persian Gulf continues, without commentary, on C-SPAN.
But to permit Saddam Hussein to link...
For viewers who want to know more about C-SPAN, we publish